The brutal war between communists and those who are anti-communist. The war, responsible for over 3 million deaths of soldiers and innocent civilians. The war that spiked anti-war protests and movements led by Martin Luther King across the United States demanding to free the soldiers from this gruesome fight and its poor conditions. This awful war lasted from 1954 to 1975. However, its impact still affects us to this day. This is a mishap of the Vietnam War.
During the start of the Vietnam War, debates arose not only between communists and anti-communists, but also from citizens demanding to stop sending soldiers to the horrific battle, costing many soldiers' lives. Nearing the end, the United States and Vietnam would establish diplomatic agreements between each other to establish peace and tranquility.
Before the Vietnam War took place, many years prior, Vietnam had been under French's rule. In 1877, Vietnam was taken over by the French, turning it into a French colony. However, when World War II occurred, the French momentarily lost control of their colony, which further caused Japanese troops to invade Vietnam. While France and Japan fought over Vietnam, a communist leader by the name of Ho Chi Minh started an independence movement in May 1941 called the Viet Minh. The Viet Minh was specifically created in order to separate from the French and become independent. On September 2nd, 1945, Ho Chi Minh declared independence from France.
Unfortunately, France rejected this idea, which sent the Viet Minh to resort to warfare to fight for independence in Vietnam. This battle is known as the Battle of Dien Bien Phu, and it lasted for 4 months. Eventually, the Viet Minh went against the French, establishing their independence from France. After the war, the Geneva Accords were signed, which essentially formed an agreement for the French to withdraw their troops from Vietnam. It would also split Vietnam into North and South. North Vietnam was a communist government led by Ho Chi Minh, and South Vietnam was a republican government led by Emperor Bao Dai.
With Vietnam now split into North being communist and South being anti-communist, rivalry was bound to happen. Ho Chi Minh, after taking inspiration from China and the Soviet Union, aimed to have all of Vietnam be under a single communist rule. On the other hand, South Vietnam aimed to have their government modeled after the West, such as the United States government. During the midst of this, Bao Dai, the leader of South Vietnam, had retired, leaving a new leader by the name of Ngo Dinh Diem to take his place. Many of the South Vietnamese civilians believed that Ngo Dinh Diem was a corrupt leader, so they started to support Ho Chi Minh and his communist government in return. Starting in 1958, the fight between communists and anti-communists had begun. Attacks in South Vietnam started and were increasing rapidly. These attacks were led by the National Liberian Front, a communist organization in South Vietnam.
This was the start of warfare. During all this, the United States heard insight on the conflict between the two sides, and Ho Chi Minh's plan on wanting to rule communism throughout all of Vietnam. United States President at the time, Dwight Eisenhower, along with the US government, feared the spread of communism throughout Asia. This would later cause the government to send military advisors in ships to Vietnam. However, in 1964, a US Navy ship would be attacked by the North Vietnamese in an incident known as the Gulf of Tonkin. This greatly escalated the battle, causing the US to send over 500,000 soldiers to Vietnam by 1968.
American soldiers went around Vietnam looking for members of the Viet Cong, which is an army organization that supported Ho Chi Minh's communist rule. However, this ended up having soldiers kill lots of innocent lives, mistaking them for Viet Cong. Soldiers would capture civilians and imprison them in strategic hamlets surrounded with barbed wire in an effort to track down any remaining Viet Cong hiding in villages. This went on in a series of massacres, killing more and more innocent lives, including women and children, in a desperate attempt of fighting off Viet Cong communists. But the Viet Cong still managed to get away, using a method known as guerrilla warfare, which consisted of hit-and-run attacks towards the soldiers. Since the Viet Cong knew the land better, many were able to escape very easily. Ho Chi Minh promised civilians in the South that after war, they will be given more land and more freedom, which in turn caused more people to turn their backs on the South Vietnamese government. One day, the Viet Cong severely attacked the American soldiers. This would cost many US soldiers lives, which led to Americans thinking there was no way to win this war. Many were outraged at the fact that America was fighting for a small country and thought that there was no point sacrificing American troops' lives. During the war, Martin Luther King led an anti-war movement, questioning the moral grounds and even calling the Vietnam War a quote-unquote blasphemy against all that America stands for. Government officials debated whether to remove the US troops from Vietnam or to keep them fighting. Others argued to continue the war to prevent communism from spreading. Protests were occurring all over the US of people declaring to stop the Vietnam War. Anti-war songs were even made, such as Masters of War or Give Peace a Chance. In the end, in 1973, the United States signed a peace agreement in Paris, ending the involvement of the US military in the Vietnam War. By 1995, President Bill Clinton would establish diplomatic relations with Vietnam, officially ending the conflict and war between America and Vietnam. Clinton and Florida Representative Douglas Peterson would meet in Hanoi, the capital of Vietnam, to further establish peace between the two nations.
After the Vietnam War, it was found that over 50,000 US soldiers died and over 300,000 developed injuries. This was a costly war costing well over $1 trillion in today's money. The televised scenes of war made people back in America lose their moral superiority. In Vietnam, things were even worse. Around 500,000 innocent civilians died from either being mistaken as Viet Cong, dying to US airstrikes, or massacres destroying villages, leaving many scarred. Communism took over Vietnam and punished those who were against communism in concentration camps. Many Vietnamese Southerners left Vietnam as a result. Many years after the Vietnam War, around 700,000 American soldiers will suffer from psychological effects, trauma, and PTSD. However, some good things come out of it, such as the removal of drafting citizens into war, now being an all-volunteer force. The Wars Power Act was also passed, restricting the president from sending forces without Congress approval.
In the end, the Vietnam War was a truly tragic battle, to say the least. It had a huge effect on the United States and Vietnam, from the results of over 2 million Vietnamese deaths and over 50,000 American soldier deaths. This was a war that spiked hundreds of anti-war protests across the US and has been one of the most controversial wars to ever exist. There were tons of debates questioning the morality of sending soldiers to these horrible conditions in Vietnam, as well as the attack of innocent Vietnamese civilians and massacres. While many tragic outcomes occurred, the war helped shape the United States government and led to measures of protecting the rights of US citizens. The United States would also eventually form peaceful diplomatic relations with Vietnam in the future, creating the relationship we know today.